This episode is brought to you by Backwards Planning Financial. Start planning for your death before you're gone.
In 1992, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark decision in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. In it, the court reaffirmed the constitutional right, so-called, to abortion from Roe v. Wade. In the written decision, Justice Anthony Kennedy famously summarized the essence of late 20th century liberalism. He wrote, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life." In case you didn't notice, this is how you devolve from a Christian nation to transgender story time at the local library, gay pride parades, and widespread societal degeneracy in just a few generations. This is the apotheosis of atomized, democratized, and morally bankrupt man. Or as the author of the book of Judges put it, every man did what was right in his own eyes. Since 1992, America has slid even farther into a secular liberal wasteland. Religion has been banished from the political sphere because, separation of church and state. But what that really meant is that while Christianity was banned from politics, other false worship was not. In fact, it was promoted, like the LGBTQ cult, Diwali, Hanukkah, Ramadan, and more. Sadly, this is a far cry from what our Christian forefathers thought about the relationship between religion and politics. As James Baird recently pointed out in his new book, King of Kings, the reformers held that government must promote Christianity as the only true religion. Since a pious people is necessary for a good society, the promotion of such piety is paramount for civil magistrates. Even Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story argued in the 1860s that the First Amendment was never intended to separate religion from politics, nor to create a secular nation in which religious pluralism advanced. He wrote, "The real object of the First Amendment was not to countenance, much less to advance Mohammedanism or Judaism or infidelity by prostrating Christianity, but to exclude all rivalry among Christian sects and to prevent any national ecclesiastical patronage of the national government." Now, sadly, even many Reformed pastors and theologians today have adopted the liberal narrative that every man may do what is right in his own eyes. For example, in a recent article in which he attempted to shoot holes in Christian nationalism, Kevin Deyoung said the government should have an almost non-existent role in promoting the Christian religion. The fear, he said, is that since people are prone to evil, government ought to be limited. By way of contrast, the Reformed Fathers would have said the exact opposite. Since people are prone to be evil, a virtuous government must make laws and rule in such a way to bring about virtue in their people. In his article, 6 Questions for Christian Nationalists, Deyoung writes, "But the clear record of history demonstrates that human beings will not agree on how ultimate spiritual and metaphysical questions should be answered. A better approach, which most Christians and most Westerners came to discover, is to take government out of the business of discerning and then promoting the answer to life's most important questions." In other words, since people are bad, since people often fail to discern the correct answers to important questions, government should leave them to do whatever seems right in their own eyes. Side note, this seems suspiciously like telling the government to discern and promote the answer to life's most important questions, since the role of government in discerning these things is actually one of those important questions in life. But I digress. This new discovery of which Deyoung speaks is not 1950s conservatism. Instead, it's progressive liberalism from the last 60 years. What Deyoung is defending is the liberal slop of Justice Kennedy. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. In this episode of the King's Hall podcast, we'll respond to Kevin's article and why we think it's vital that we return to the political philosophy of men who lived and thought and wrote before the Christian West descended into the apostasy of secular liberalism. Before, that is, we lost our minds. The King's Hall podcast exists to make self-ruled men who rule well and win the world.
This is Dave. Dave is dead. When he wasn't, he was a successful businessman with a rather large estate. This is Ben. As Dave's son, Ben has just inherited a logistical nightmare. Dave wasn't exactly organized with his estate. Sorting through folders, receipts, and records, a hunting lodge in Montana, a 401k, lots of investments, several bank accounts, and of course, taxes. Ben was overwhelmed. Enter Joe Garcia, Backwards Planning Financial. When Ben called Joe and explained everything, Joe replied,
"No problem. That's easy."
and somehow it was. With Joe's guidance, Ben was able to put a robust financial plan in place which helped mitigate risk and bring order to the chaos, while building wealth, organizing his estate, easing the tax burdens, and cutting unnecessary costs. He helped Ben do something Dave never did: plan ahead. Starting at the end and working backwards, Ben now has a plan for his own family. Now his kids won't go through what he did when he eventually... Backwards Planning Financial. Start planning for your death before you're gone.
Mount Athos Performance is a family-owned fitness brand that gives you the tools you need to cultivate a lifestyle of health and fitness. Bro, you know I'm doing an ad right now, right?
Oh, yeah. No, you're doing great, man. Keep it up.
But can you stop shaking the bottle just for a minute?
Oh, wait. You want me to stop shaking my Mount Athos Performance Shaker bottle filled with Mount Athos Performance Protein?
Yes, that would be great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Well, as I was saying, Mount Athos sources their goat whey from their family-owned farm so they can create a product that's not full of crazy chemicals or additives.
Oh, yeah, dude. You can tell this is the good stuff. I'm drinking this goat so that I can get goated. Oh, yeah.
Well, they have products like protein powder, creatine, supplements for your mind. There should be one for sleep somewhere. Head to athosperform.com and use code NCP20 for 20% off your order today.
Welcome to this episode of the King's Hall Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, joined by another host. I'm Eric Kahn. That's
Ryan Scott Stapp Sauve.
Scott Stapp Sauve.
The Creed cover is coming, okay? I said I would do it. I'm gonna do it. Stop nagging me.
Here's how
Stop
I look at
nagging
it, Brian. The Lord Jesus, his glory is grace and truth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But your glory also contains truth, as in faithfulness to keep your word.
That's true.
Do you see
I'm
the
gonna do it.
tie-in here?
I'm gonna do it.
The tie-in is seamless.
I'm gonna do it.
You're going to do...
I'm gonna do a Creed cover, like I said I would. Foolishly, if that one reply to me got like 1,000 likes or something, which it did, I'm gonna do it.
Do you know why I got all the likes?
Because of you.
I dropped it in like 100 GCs. And I was like, boys.
I am in like 1 GC. How are you in 100? You know what? Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't matter. It's for a cause.
It's for you didn't even say a good cause. No, I like that you just said it's for a cause.
It's for a cause. I can't promise it's all good. But what I can promise you, Brian, we're going to have a good discussion today.
Yes, we are.
Really, because Stephen said it. Stephen Wolf.
Yeah.
So he critiqued Kevin Deyoung's article on Christian nationalism. Yes. And what I would like to say to Stephen is that your article was not helpful.
Don't do it.
It was not helpful.
No, it wasn't helpful.
It was logically precise.
Yes.
And eviscerating.
It was brilliant. American brilliant, not British brilliant.
Your arguments were convincing.
They were persuasive.
Can I say that?
His syllogisms were both valid and sound.
Yes.
It was technically a good structure in terms of the argumentation, and the premises were all true.
Exactly.
Ergo, like such as the Iraq, it was valid and sound. Thank you, Stephen. And what we're talking about is Stephen Wolf's Lone Bulwark episode. What was it? Destroying or dismantling Deyoung. It's like 2 hours of vintage Stephen Wolf. He goes through the Kevin Deyoung article line by line. It's much more, how do I put this? Intelligent than what we're going to do?
I prefer to think of it like we're more like the brothers in Good Will Hunting that are looking for a playground brawl.
So,
but we're
so what I
just as
said-
right.
So what I said.
We're just as right.
Yeah, no, Stephen, the thing that about Stephen's mind is that he is genuinely an expert on these subjects, so in a scholarly sense. So when he goes through, his brain is brimming with Althusius, and he knows exactly what Locke meant and said and wrote, and he's familiar with the genealogy of all the ideas involved. So he can go through and say, this is where this idea came from. Maybe Deyoung doesn't even know that's where this idea came from.
Yeah.
We don't have all of that, but we're still interested in the subject and have some things to say. But go listen to it if you haven't. Go check out Stephen's. You should be listening to the Lone Bulwark anyway. Go sub on YouTube or listen, but it's really good. Great
It was a
episode.
great episode. Brian, if you had to summarize the episode,
Yeah.
kind of in one
Yeah.
statement, what is Stephen Wolf saying about Kevin's article?
He's saying that Kevin DeYoung, whether he realizes it or not, is functioning from a functionally liberal frame and assuming that frame as descended from Mount Sinai and inerrant, and then operating within that frame and attempting to converse with somebody who's actually saying, the Christian nationalist, that frame is altogether wrong. It's incorrect from the starting point. In fact, a lot of the problems with our society, politically, socially, et cetera, today come from the genesis and success of that frame. And so we should not argue within it. We should reject it and argue for a distinctly historically Christian way of doing politics. And so that was not very concise, but it's basically, Kevin DeYoung, you're an accidental liberal.
Yeah, I would even say, like, summarizing, in my words, which are generally more nuanced. But I would say Kevin DeYoung is kind of ignorant about what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He makes a lot of statements that are not arguments. And at the end of it, it's sort of like the Billy Madison. The response should be, everything that you just said was completely incoherent. It made no sense whatsoever. And everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
At no point.
At no point.
And the danger of it is that, so you get a guy like Kevin DeYoung, who's a reasonable, very much, he's trying to be a reasonable guy, I think, and then he wades into this area of political theory, and where Stephen Wolf is a genuine expert, for example. And he assumes an authority because of his role as a pastor that he genuinely doesn't have in this question. And so he's a lay person with respect to these questions. I'm a lay person as well. You're a lay person as well. That's not actually a bad thing, but it's good to recognize what you are.
I'm actually an Althusian scholar.
Oh, okay. I'm a lay person. Eric is basically omnicompetent.
Wow.
But then, so
I didn't want to have to say it.
What happens is you have pastors and theologians who are wading into a discussion, and they're talking about things like the Westminster Confession and thinking that they can levy or leverage the Westminster Confession against a Christian Christian nationalist, when the Christian nationalist like Stephen Wolf is actually saying, what I'm promoting quite demonstrably is the political theory of all the people who wrote the Westminster Confession.
Yeah, and there's some variation because Kevin obviously is going to quote from the Americanized version.
Yeah, the 1788
which takes
revision.
out a bunch of the...
Yeah, and even that, Stephen, I think, talks about this. Even the revision, it doesn't do everything people today think that it does.
Well, and the other thing it doesn't do, as Stephen points out, it doesn't make a philosophical argument.
And it can be incorrect. If you can demonstrate with a valid argument from Scripture or reason that some idea or other in the confession is incorrect, then anybody should agree, including the people who wrote the confession. They said this, more or less, that it's not inerrant. And so it's subject to correction. It can be wrong. But even that is so overstated, the American revision stuff. A lot of the people... I'm not an expert in this subject, so you could fact check me on this. I'm pretty convinced. I'm pretty certain that the people who wrote the American revision, many of them were still establishmentarians and actually believed, at least theoretically, that establishment was potentially just, possible, could be a good thing.
Yeah, it's also interesting, I think, you mentioned it in the cold open, but the statement that we read from Kevin, where he's like, moderns now know.
We discovered.
And this really comes back to the error that we pointed out with feminism. When you invent a new sexuality, biblical sexuality, in the late 1980s, and then you say, like Homer Simpson, everybody before this was basically dumb.
Yeah.
I'm not, though. Like science now knows. It's sort of one of those where I actually want to be leery of anything that's that new.
Yeah.
Particularly when you say, okay, this really, really took off in the 80s and 90s in America. Yeah. What Kevin's espousing, this kind of secular liberalism, really took off. And you say, what's been the fruit in the last 30 years?
Really, really bad.
Has it been good or bad?
Catastrophic.
And then you say, what was the fruit of like the Reformation?
Yeah, fruit of hundreds of years of unbroken, pretty much hegemony when it comes to a view of the sexes in Christian thought, whether Roman Catholic, Protestant, like on a lot of points, you could find a pretty central way of understanding these things. And then, post-Enlightenment, French Revolution, the modern liberalism, feminism, all of these things show up. Egalitarianism is really kind of at the root of it. And it's very, very dangerous to assume that you're operating from basically your operating system has correct rules that it's operating by. And that's actually the problem that I see with a lot of this, is that people tend to basically assume that all of the rules that they learned growing up, kind of the baseline assumptions, are more or less correct, meaning their instincts, intuitions, their moral instincts and intuitions are basically right. And then they take those instincts and moral intuitions, and then they sort out new arguments. So like Christian nationalism, they say, well, that sounds really icky. We're going to get into it. That sounds racist. That sounds anti-Semitic. That sounds bigoted. That sounds anti-woman. That sounds this. That sounds extreme. And then they dismiss the ideas. And what they don't realize is that they had a step they needed to do before they started evaluating those arguments. And they needed to actually stop and evaluate their own moral framework that they're leveraging to make these critiques. Because turns out if you have the wrong rules written into the operating system, it's not going to produce reliable outcomes with respect to truth, goodness, or beauty. And I think that's what, to sum it up, Kevin DeYoung's article got wrong, is that it turns out, Stephen demonstrates this, it turns out that he's operating as if Justice Kennedy was right. It turns out he's operating as if the Warren Court was right. And then he's just assuming that without demonstration or argument. And then with that assumption saying, well, if this assumption is true, well, then definitely Christian nationalism is out. And he's correct about that.
Yeah.
But the problem isn't Christian nationalism, it's his assumptions.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem becomes that you have a lot of conservatives today who haven't examined those moral frameworks. And so conservatives at root are basically saying the same thing as leftist liberals or guys like Kennedy, where every individual just makes up his own mind about what meaning the universe, truth is. You're going to leave that to every single individual. Yeah. Well, it's going to take you to a bad place. But it's also why in the conservative movement, it takes you to Dave Rubin and his husband buying children.
Absolutely.
But the conservatives, I think, for the most part, because most of them have been trained in this liberal secular order, they haven't even thought through that principle.
No.
I actually think, too, you saw this happening with Charlie Kirk in real time, where people would ask him questions and he would kind of... The one thing I could appreciate about him is he was willing to actually go back and think through it. And you'll hear these debates with him where he's like, well, actually, if you go back to the founding of our country, like 12 of the 13 colonies had a religious test for office. Yeah. And he's processing that and going, as we all have to do, and saying, wait a minute. Maybe the things that I believe are at root false.
Yeah.
And I have to change. I want to get into, Kevin, where he begins. Why not Christian nationalism?
Yeah.
So if Jamie could pull this up, I think is it already pulled
Jamie,
up?
could you pull up that article for us?
I mean, Jamie is good.
Wow. We're getting better at this. We're going to get better at integrating a screen recording so you can see what we're looking at into our YouTube video. If you're not actually watching this on YouTube, you'll still be able to follow. We'll make it plain what we're looking at on the podcast version. But for those YouTube subscribers, we do, I think even it's an enriching experience to watch the King's Hall versus just to listen. So we've got the article pulled up.
Yeah, so why not Christian nationalism? Number one, he says there is still no shared understanding of what the term means. Many proponents equate Christian nationalism with support for some kind of church establishment and for the use of the state's coercive power in matters of religion. I'm opposed to both of these things. It's interesting, Stephen points this out, but we use terms all the time, like conservative.
Yeah.
And people are fine using them. And there's such a wide variety of what they can mean.
Is it Dave Rubin or is it like us? Because those can both be called conservatives by different people, but what does that mean? Reformed is another one.
I would just be curious why, Kevin, why all of a sudden it would be a problem.
Yeah, why a term has to have to the 10th decimal point precision across its use universally before we accept it as a valid term.
Especially when you're going to go and write an article that has like no precision whatsoever. You might want to rethink that. The other thing I would say here that's interesting to me is there's this insistence from the opponents of Christian nationalism. There's like an insistence on misunderstanding what's being said.
Right.
So you want to go to every person and hold a gun to their head and force them to convert. And you're like, literally no one is...
Do the reading.
You just look uneducated and not smart. And we'll get there too, but like number 2, the most prominent book making the case for Christian nationalism, like say his name.
Say his name, Kevin.
It is kind of, to me, this is actually, it actually does bother me.
Oh, it does.
That it's like you're not even going to say the name of the guy.
The best part is that he quotes Douglas Wilson like 15 times in this article and like interacts with Doug's points. And to Stephen's point in his response, Doug is not a scholar of these things. He tends to speak very imprecisely. Like he defines Christian nationalism as just like we stop making Jesus mad at different points. Doug is a popularizer. Great, we need a lot of popularizers. But Kevin is attempting in this article to really interact, it seems, with the heart of the Christian nationalist movement and its intellectual center. And he barely references Stephen Wolfe and doesn't interact with his work at all.
Yeah, I just think if you want to be seen as credible, number one, you should know what you're talking about. But then for anybody who read Stephen Wolfe's book, and then you hear how the argument is characterized, and you're like, did you read it? Are you intent on not understanding what he's talking about?
Yep.
So that would be another kind of problem I would have with it. Number 3, so first of all, one thing to notice with these, there are no arguments being made.
No.
That's not what this is. Number 3, nationalism refers to a set of political and ethical commitments that arose at the end of the blah, blah, blah.
The 18th century were shaped through the 19th century by Romanticism and the Industrial Revolution. Championing Christian nationalism is not the same as recognizing that for most of American history, many Americans would have thought of their country as a Christian nation. So he's rejecting to the term nationalism and trying to give it a very, here, a technical definition of nationalism as a movement and as a political ideology and, where it...
But you kind of hear the same types of arguments. Like I've heard E. Michael Jones make this argument that like no consciousness of race came about until post-Enlightenment. It's sort of the same argument here that like nobody thought of nations, nobody thought of peoples. Yep, nation and ethnos, it's the same word, right? But
yeah.
So this is also, it's kind of like...
Again, Stephen Wolfe in his book, in a very technical and precise way, defines what he means by Christian nationalism. So even if you wanted to then ignore that altogether, like, oh, I'm interacting with Christian nationalism, right? The most central book being Stephen Wolfe's book on the subject. And then I'm going to ignore everything Stephen Wolfe said about what he means by Christian nationalism. And instead, with one eye, my hand over my eye like this so I can't see that definition, I'm going to go make a couple things up about nationalism generally, all of which Stephen addressed in the book. The history of nationalism in brief, in a way that would help you to understand how he is and is not using the terminology.
Right.
But it's just, people, even in this very article, I think Kevin doesn't do a good job of distinguishing between things like a nation and a country, which are different things. A country is a geopolitical entity. It's a state. A nation is a people. Those are different things. Like you can have somebody who lives in Italy who's actually French in terms of their ethnicity because of the changing in borders and things like that. In leading up to World War II, one of the issues was that many Germans who were Germans nationally in terms of their ethnicity and history found themselves in the borders of other countries, of geopolitical entities.
Yeah.
That led to huge issues. So we're not making fine distinctions. And the problem is that people who read this who are not conversant in the material at all, they will be like, oh, that was really helpful and persuasive.
Well, I think Stephen actually talks about this. It's actually a lot of how Doug writes. where it's rhetorically effective,
Right.
but it's intentionally imprecise.
Yeah.
And part of it is that fuels engagement.
Correct. There's a
Right?
gap.
So this gets people talking. But I also, the thing that I would caution against, Joe Sobran actually mentioned this years ago with the use of the term like anti-Semite.
Yeah.
He said it's actually a really effective way to bludgeon people because you're imprecise.
Yeah.
Right? Because the terms are never defined. It actually lets you use that political tool however you want.
Yeah.
And it causes people to live in sort of an existential dread of ever being called like a racist.
Because what it gives you is the absolute power as the arbiter.
Right.
Since you haven't defined your terms, you're the one in a case-by-case basis. What you're really doing is you're doing friend-enemy politics.
Yeah.
And you're using the vagary, the lack of precision, as a cloak to shield what you're really doing, which really isn't separating people on the basis of truth or goodness or beauty.
No.
You're separating them on the basis of friend and enemy and interacting with them using this cudgel weaponized
And that really
imprecision.
gets to his fourth kind of concern. He's very concerned, which is, it says, increasingly the loudest voices arguing for Christian nationalism are marked by juvenile insults steeped in online jargon from the dissident right. What's more, some of these proponents traffic openly in racist ideology, anti-Semitism, and neo-Nazi sympathies. The most strident Christian nationalism proponents on social media are often a potent combination of oafery and demagoguery. He'll actually get into this later in addressing Stephen. He was upset with Stephen that he called PCA pastors fat.
Are they fat, though?
And Stephen was like, well, I thought you would care about the health of ministers. I mean, I'm just trying to help you out. But
This is the problem, is that a lot of the time what's happening is that these loudest voices are being dismissed because their arguments on the level of definition are being called juvenile demagoguery and oafery because they are resistant to the post-war consensus and post-war order.
Well,
They break the laws of liberalism. So by definition, in that framework, they are juvenile.
Yeah.
Nobody's actually dealing with the arguments of these people.
Well, and that would be my point. So this is just it's an ad hominem attack, really. And we've seen this, you can call them dank anons. You can say that they're, crackling with envy. But what hasn't, you can call them anti-Semites, racists, Nazis. But the one thing that Kevin didn't do with this concern is make a valid argument.
No, he didn't. And if you say, okay, Stephen Wolfe wrote a 500-page book, more or less.
It's long.
A 500-page book in the vein and in the style of a work of classic Reformed political theory and philosophy.
Right.
All right. It is dense and weighty. It has many premises that can be brought into dispute and argued about. And instead of doing that, what do we get? Well, the same thing that happens, like, Andrew Torba came out with that Christian Nationalism website. He made it in like a week, probably, of like nicotine-fueled frenzy. He made like a 1 million word whole website. He listed the King's Hall in there, or New Christendom Press. So thank you to Andrew for putting us there. And I reposted it and said something like, one of the things I appreciate about Christian nationalism as a movement is that it's actually falsifiable. It has enough specificity and edges to what it is and is not arguing for that you can draw it out and you can debate with it. But look at the response to Torba's website. Probably 99.9993% of negative responses to it were just some form of They were some form of Andrew Torba's an anti-Semite. This person's a white this or that. This person hates this person. They are evil and wicked because of this, that, or the other thing. And instead of actually dealing with any of the arguments, they just dismiss them on the basis of a very, very flimsy ad hominem. Well, that's a problem for somebody who's claiming to be intellectually serious about the debate.
I think part of the problem is, like, if you go back and you say, what world is Kevin Deyoung operating in? Well, so he's a PCA pastor, I believe, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the interesting thing about it is that it's the PCA, right? But it's like many churches in America. It is boomer world. So that means that it's like a lot of neoconservatism.
Yeah.
It's a lot of playing to the sentiments of, hysterical women.
Yeah.
And so this is the best way to steer that kind of group of people is just to start throwing around words like neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
Stephen was very clear in his response. He's like, I've actually been an opponent of the whole revive German history, World War II history revisionism, even, and maybe even I would say, like, I'd love to hear more what Stephen has to say there, because maybe I would disagree on some of those points. I think getting our history right is really important, but I understand he's thinking through this, and he hasn't been one of the guys who's been saying, like, Hitler was a good guy or any of that. And so I think he's rightly frustrated. He's like, well, wait a minute. I wrote a whole book. I didn't talk about any of those things.
Because they're not actually central to his argument.
They're not.
They can be, those points can be relevant and historically interesting and even have a lot to do with American culture today. And I think they all do. But for Stephen, he's saying, that's not my area. This is my area. I have a more modest and narrow focus on the argument I'm trying to put forth, which is that Christian nationalism, as he very carefully defines it in the book, is a good and proper political theory that Christians should rally to achieve.
Yeah.
That's his narrow point in the book. And that this idea is consistent with the history of Reformed political thought. Very much consistent. And on that point, which Kevin just genuinely doesn't really interact with, I think Stephen is overwhelmingly successful in making his case.
Yeah.
So that's why it's frustrating to a guy like Stephen, to us, to say, you're going to turn it into this thing where it's like via epithet, an unfounded just statement.
Well, and
you're going to dismiss the whole thing.
This is the thing you've got to understand. So, encourage people, this Founder's book, King of Kings, James Baird makes a lot of these same arguments. As you said in the cold open, that, a Christian magistrate, a government, has the duty to promote the one true religion, which is Christianity. But here's the point. Those arguments come from way before World War II.
Correct.
Right. And I think that's what's brilliant about Stephen's point is, it's like Calvin and the reformers are making these arguments. You can make them without ever referencing, Nazis or World War II or anything that would be associated with the post-war consensus. But again, Kevin is not interacting with those arguments.
Yeah, and to the World War II point, like what the World Wars did, in my view, is they brought an end to Christendom. They brought an end to the death throes of Christendom, and they replaced a world where Christianity, Christian nations, Christian faith was set against the forces of Satan in history, to where actually the two dominant views became two different camps of Satan. So you had basically the American, the Western replacement of Christian ideology with a broad multicultural globalist post-war consensus style secularism. And that became the team over here. That's one team. And then on the other side, you had communism. And what I think happened is that Christianity lost, and then two different forms of communism were the remaining two parties. And that, not that there's, Christians aren't still here, and in many ways we're not still alive and fighting.
Yeah,
but in terms of institutional power.
Are you talking about sort of like the Soviet bloc?
Yes.
That sort of like hard authoritarianism, but then in America we get like Gramscian Marxism. We get all of the social movements that came out of it, not just. I'm not even just talking about the last 20 years, but especially since the 1960s. Yeah.
And even the 1960s were genuinely, this is why World War II matters so much, because the political order in America that arose through the World Wars and then gained dominance after the World Wars, and I'm talking about in the late 40s, 50s, and then into the 60s, that is the vehicle through which we got the domination of secular liberalism, Marxism, and Gramscian Marxism in America, that from the 60s onward gained institutional power, and then via that institutional power took over the popular American sentiment by shaping the American mind according to its premises and presuppositions.
Well, and I think here's one of the problems. Like, everybody views, or I'd say the majority of people view it today like change will come from the ground up, or that change came from the ground up. The more that I've researched the 60s, for example, the more I realize I think the narrative is actually that we were betrayed by our elites. People, especially the normies, the average citizen, will always follow an elite who creates laws, runs institutions, and they're mostly going to believe the propaganda.
Yes.
And the only way to change that is you have to change who has institutional power.
Yep.
I even think this is interesting when you go back to the Gospels, when Christ comes, and the whole promise of throwing the mountain into the sea is like, think about how substantial this is. Christ says, I'll destroy the temple and rebuild it. And he overthrows an entire, religious order in his death, burial, and resurrection.
Yeah.
And then creates a totally new thing. It just struck me that he didn't like reform an old institution necessarily.
No.
He said, I'm going to destroy that thing and I'm going to build a new one.
New wineskins.
New wineskins.
No, the old ones burst with the arrival of the new yeast.
So I just think it's interesting as you compare that to our day and age now. When I read this article from Kevin Deyoung, what I think is, and what I see in him is our ecclesiastical institutions have been almost totally subverted.
Yes, and that includes these scholarly institutions.
Yes.
Because this is so massive for the culture of the church today. Elite scholarly institutions largely make pastors. Especially in the Reformed world is this true, because most Reformed denominations require a Master of Divinity to be ordained into their denomination. Where do you get one of those? At a higher Christian institution of learning. Now, the problem is that if it's true that especially the institutions of higher learning have been corrupted by essentially Marxist egalitarianism and this post-war consensus order, scholars are often very concerned with remaining respectable within the mainstream of thought at their time.
Yeah.
And so the mechanisms of benefit or loss, like what word am I looking for?
I think it's like
the incentive structures.
Yeah.
The incentive structures are aligned to preserve the center of that institutional power, which on the level of higher education in Reformed circles are going to be those seminaries and colleges that are very much infiltrated on many levels with teaching these background presuppositions of post-war American thinking, liberalism.
Well, think about this. So Kevin Deyoung knows this. If he were to believe and say true things that are taught throughout the history of the Reformed movement in church, things like Zach Garris has said.
Yeah.
What happened? You'll be brought up on charges. Yeah. You'll be pushed out of the denomination.
Yep.
Right? So like he knows that.
He knows that.
And they have to live and play by these rules. And I think, it really is one of these things where I think men are just going to have to say, look, they're going to kick me out of the church. They're going to de-credential me.
Yeah.
And to be somebody who speaks the truth on these issues in this age, you're going to have to be hated.
Even going back to that fourth objection, everybody's basically a buffoon and an oaf and a demagogue and all this stuff. I was posting last week a lot about kind of tongue-in-cheek, but about immigration. I was like, they all have to go back. Because I go to Smith's, my local grocery store, and I'm checking out, and I'm in Utah. Like we're in Utah, very, very white place in America overall. Less and less so with Hispanic migration because of Spencer Cox. So I get to the checkout, and about 3 months ago, this changed. You used to be able to, you scan your items, you hit pay, and then you put your card in, whatever, you leave. Well, now there's a new step about 3 months ago. Select before you start, English or Spanish. It doesn't even default to English. You have to select. You cannot check out unless you tap English. So I was like, I had to press, one for
while
English.
Feliz Navidad is playing.
Yeah, and then like the same week, Lexi, my wife, texted me and goes, we're at like TJ Maxx or something, and they're playing. It wasn't Feliz Navidad, but they were playing Spanish translations of Christmas carols. So like all of the classic Christmas carols, Christian Christmas carols, and they were playing Spanish versions of them. And she's like, what is happening? I'm not in Mexico. I'm in America. And so I said, they're playing Spanish carols at the store. They all have to go back. And some guy responded, and he goes, do you think it's wise for a pastor to use this kind of language in his posts?
It is very concerning to me.
And I just look at what he did there.
Actually, can I say something?
Go ahead.
When I look at the tone and the posture of that kind of post,
yeah.
Actually, there's a check in my spirit.
How much is it for, and where did it come from? Who wrote the check in your spirit, Eric?
It was $7,000.
I think we know who wrote the check in his spirit. I think we know.
Dang it.
Okay. Here's the problem. This is the assumption in that post. And I responded with something to the effect of, You're assuming that forced multiculturalism, the demographic replacement, and globalist open border policies are wisdom.
Yes.
Because it's actually, look at what he did. It's not a discussion where we can bring multiple ideas. One idea being we should send back these millions of illegal immigrants that are flooding our nation and weaponized legal immigrants as well, because we have both in America, especially accelerated in the last decade. We should send them back to where they came from, remigration. So that's one idea. And then there's like open borders, globalism, basically the libs. It wasn't even, let's debate those ideas. It was, your idea is against the rules from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's unwise to even bring it up. What they're doing right there is assuming the liberal frame and operating from it. They're saying that you're an unwise, oafish demagogue just for saying it.
If you look at what Kevin does with point number 4, this is fundamentally a tenet that Herbert Marcuse taught, kind of one of the fathers of the sexual revolution, from the Frankfurt School in Germany, in critical race theory as we know it, Frankfurt School, all that stuff. But he called it repressive tolerance, and that's fundamentally what this is.
Yeah.
To your point is, no, there's a certain set of Christian moral principles that we exclude from the beginning. We just call them misogyny.
Yeah.
So if you espouse patriarchy, or
that's against the rules.
Yeah, you're a bigot.
You don't understand.
You're a misogynist.
It's like
you hate women.
It's like making a football game where you have Team Christians and then like the other team, and Team Christian quarterback gets the snap, he throws a Hail Mary, receiver brings it down, touchdown, 40-yard play, touchdown, and the ref goes, burr, he throws the flag, and he says, the Christian team's not allowed to score. You broke the rules, so we're calling the play back. It's actually an automatic. They get the ball, right? That's one of the rules.
Yeah.
Don't you want to play by the rules? And you're like, well, you can't play a game of football where that's the rule for one team.
Yeah.
Is that we can't even discuss your ideas. We've dismissed them via what? I would say a demagogic, oafish insult, actually, if I had to pick a term for it. You've dismissed it via the rules of the system, so we can't even discuss the issue.
Yeah.
That's so much of what's going on in the current discourse in political theory.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we'll jump into the 6 questions. Jamie, if you could roll through that. Good job, Jamie.
Way to go.
Way to go. So number 1, do you unequivocally renounce? First of all, just reading this makes me want to throw up.
When you started to read it out loud, the masculine urge that rose in my chest to just physically attack you was strong.
All I could think of was the Tucker Carlson and Pierce Morgan. And he's like, hold my hand. We'll say it together.
We'll say it together. Hey, can I just say, before we started recording, we were singing Money for Nothing by Dire Straits.
Yeah, we were.
I think you know what I mean.
I think you know.
The original.
The original.
Not the radio edit.
Not the radio edit.
The verse. The verse.
Well, there's actually more than one, too, actually.
But the verse.
Yes.
He's got his own jet airplane. He's a millionaire. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamie laughed.
Martina
McBride laughed.
That's right. They're both laughing. So number 1, do you unequivocally renounce anti-Semitism, racism, and Nazism? I guess it's helpful to say, too, he leads with, here then are 6 questions for Christian nationalists and for those who are drawn to their vision of a more aggressively Christian magistrate and a vision for church-state relations that moves beyond the classic liberalism of the last 250 years. Kevin, first of all, you think that you're like, he thinks he's like a Burkean conservative. And what he's espousing is like Kennedy slop.
Oops.
Like, this is not what Burke talked about.
If you want to get a really insightful historical take on this, again, go listen to Stephen's episode and what he says about Locke and Lockean individualism.
That's what this is. It's not Christian.
I'm not going to attempt to reproduce it here. I'm not as smart or well-read or handsome as Stephen, quite frankly.
Yeah, he's quite frankly. Yeah, quite frankly.
But number 1, do you unequivocally renounce all of these bad words that we have labeled you as for your actual ideas and dismissed you on the basis of? And the answer is...
So it starts out with, number 1, we're going to start with leftist frame.
Yes.
This is how the leftist thinks. You have to start by denouncing people.
How long have you been diddling children?
I'd like
Question one.
Kevin. I'd like for you to denounce pedophilia and what are like all the worst things. What is the insinuation? The insinuation is you guys are all anti-Semites, racists, and Nazis.
And here's what I've run into.
All terms that are not well defined.
Stephen talks about the extension of these things. You can define a word and then you can delineate its extension. So there's like this is what the thing is, but then the extension of a word is how it's used on the field of play. So like, how is racism used today on the field of play? And the answer is like, am I a racist? According to most people in America today, I'm one of the worst racists of all time. And yet, if you ask, like, for example, a person who is non-white in my life, has Brian ever, I don't know, harmed you and said, take that, darky? Or has Brian like ever, tripped you when you were going down the stairs? Or like, did he do something rude to you as a pastor? You came in for counseling and he said like, well, I bet this porn problem you have is because you're Mexican. Like, did Brian do any of that? No. Show some kind of racially motivated sin that I committed and you're not gonna find it. But people will say Brian's a racist because, oh, well, in an episode of The King's Hall, he made generalizations about black culture in America on the basis of demonstrable facts.
Well, and
so he's a racist.
And particularly for something like anti-Semitism, this word has basically come to mean anyone who would criticize anything the Jews or Israel has ever done and would call that wrong in any way.
Utterly unusable word today.
Yeah, I mean, it basically has come to mean nothing.
No, like
except I would say it's a political tool. Same with Nazism here. The fact is there are like I don't know of anybody who's trying to revive the Nazi party.
No.
They're not actually trying to do that. So then you get the new term, which is neo-Nazi. They're like a Nazi.
You're a neo of the Nazis.
Do you remember,
you're a new one.
Do you remember some of the things Bill Buckley would say about Pat Buchanan?
Oh, yeah.
He's not an anti-Semite, but some of the things he's said are very anti-Semitic.
Really anti-Semitic. And, take the Nazi one. Even I've noticed this. Again, when you rule out that you can't even discuss certain ideas without bad word as, your bad word, and you've broken the rules and you're unwise. So like even people, I've seen this happen. Someone will say, it's really interesting if you look at what was happening in 1930s post-World War I Germany and with the Versailles Treaty and all of these things that happened and some of the genuine political concerns of the German peoples. And then you have this leader, Adolf Hitler, and he comes in and he has these certain policies and like, let's discuss the effectiveness or ineffectiveness, the justice or injustice of those policies. And someone goes, Nazi! And you're like, no, hang on. This is a valid historical question. Yeah. I'm interested. Like, what do you think about this thing? And they're like, you anti-Semite. And you're like, what? I'm trying to literally have a discussion with you about history and political theory for the sake of like knowing what to do today. What is a good and a bad idea? And we've ruled these discussions out altogether on the basis of epithets that have been transparently weaponized by the left to destroy Christians.
Well, so look at this. Like under number one, he said a disdain for Jewish people. Okay. And then he says a belief that a secret cabal of Jews are responsible for a litany of evils in our world. So if you...
Yeah, let's talk about these.
If you... I would kind of be with him on the like, I think it's sinful to just outright hate a people group or...
like a whole general people group.
Right. Or like, he does the same thing for non-whites. Like if you're just like, for no reason, I just hate non-whites.
I hate whiteys. So, like basically the way that a lot of black people in America today think about whites and have been trained to think about whites.
I think it's sinful.
It's sinful. And it would be sinful the other direction. And the way that you would know it's happening, like I think it'd be pretty obvious to distinguish, like, I want to be able to talk about a people group and their sins and also their proclivities, my own, any people group. I can do that, but if I move into any time I see anybody who is merely ethnically or racially in that group, and I make a whole host of attitudes and assumptions towards them, and I have a personal hatred in my heart and disdain for them, I'm sinning.
Well, think about
in that
this.
action.
Yeah, so I'm with him that there can be a sinful hatred. I went to seminary with a guy who converted out of Judaism. His name was Ari. And he converted out of Judaism, and he was a Christian.
Yeah.
And he was very critical of Talmudic Judaism and especially like kosher stuff. He was like totally fake.
Because he's familiar with like what is actually going on.
And so like if I saw him and he said, "Hey, do you want a cup of coffee?" And I said, "Give me that cup," and I threw it in his face. I was like, "You're Jewish. I hate you."
Slur.
Okay, yeah, there is a category for sinful hatred.
Now,
but the problem is he puts that together with a belief that a secret cabal of Jews are responsible for a litany of evils in the world. So he's saying that you would be anti-Semitic if you said something like, the Jews run pornography.
Or like in the 20th century.
Which is a fact.
Yeah, the smut industry in the 20th century was very disproportionately led, promoted, and normalized by elite Jews.
Yeah,
which is just a statement of historical fact.
You've seen the video, I've shared it, but it's a Jewish woman in the name of Tikkun Olam. They're like post-mill vision. And she says, here's all the things that Jews have done. We brought abortion to America. We helped with civil rights. Every leftist cause in America. We did that.
Do you know what I feel in my heart when you describe all that? Disdain. Okay, so here's the distinction, and this is why he's getting it wrong right off the bat here. He is ruling out as sinful something that the scriptures actually require of us.
You should hate evil things.
It's not just ruling out something that could possibly be true. It's ruling out something God requires of his people. Put it in this context. I have a deep disdain in my heart for the white liberal American culture that destroys itself via apostasy and the buying of all of these ideologies that are absolutely civilization destroying. When I think of like the college educated feminist liberal white woman, I have a disdain in my heart for that group. Now, do I look at any white woman and assume that she's in that group? Of course not. No. Now, would I have a statistical probability where I can make some assessment of the likelihood? Sure, and then I could do my investigation. We're actually required in Scripture to disdain disdainful things.
Yeah, I would. It's kind of like the gag reflex we talked about before. Yeah. But when you see a woman at a rally and she's got a poster that says, "I'm on my 13th abortion. I'm looking forward to number 14," that is evil, and you should hate evil.
Yeah, let's talk about. He says a disdain for non-whites and a belief in the mental and spiritual inferiority.
But he
blacks.
does the same thing with number 2.
Yeah, again,
like first of all, like. You can get into all the IQ stuff.
Yeah, our Haitians, you can compare the average IQ of Haitians against Asians, against Europeans, against Englishmen, against white Americans. Like, we can do this, and just because a conclusion is politically incorrect doesn't mean that it's sinful to actually just say, well, that's true. So if you said, or another one, spiritual inferiority of blacks. The average black Christian in America, and I'm saying in terms of professed faith, not like whether they're regenerate or not. In the black Christian church, I believe it's something like 70% of professed black Christians are pro-abortion. Now, when you go into white evangelicals, that number drops radically. It is much smaller. And so whenever people say, do you believe that X is that this people group is superior to that people group? I ask the question that blows people's minds. I say, with respect to what? Because they're acting like they're asking a question that is totally sinful to even ask and think about. But again, God gave you a brain. He made a world where there is coherence and truth and falsity. So I can say, with respect to what? So are Asians superior to, let's say, Bavarians when it comes to IQ? Let's just narrow it down. Are Japanese Asians superior when it comes to IQ to Bavarians? I actually don't know, but you could figure that out. And you would be able to say, yes, Bavarians or it's probably Japanese. I don't actually know. You'd be like, this one's superior. Is that a sin to say out loud, or is that just a fact?
Well, and that becomes the problem. You're trying to label things as sin that could actually just be recognizing the world that God made.
100%. And then they pull the whole, when you tell a woman that men on average are taller than women, and you say, but I'm 5'7", it's the knack salt. It's not all X are that. Or not all X are like that.
It's a failure to understand how generalities
Not
work.
all black Christians, white Christians, Bavarians, Japanese, women, men, etc. are like that. And you say, well, I know, because what I was doing was a statistical average.
Yeah.
Okay, so what Kevin is doing in his definition here is he's actually saying that it is sinful to do things that God requires of Christians to do. That's how muddled your thinking gets when you fall into the liberal leftist frame, because guess whose frame that is? Satan's. It's a satanic, evil, wicked frame. When you walk into it and assume that it's a good moral playbook to operate by, guess what's going to happen? You're going to join Team Satan. And I don't mean you can't be regenerate and be mistaken or even sin in these things. I mean that you're actually operating, you're playing by his rule book, the father of lies, and you're going along with his lies.
Yeah, and that's why it's like framing this thing like this. It's basically an orthodoxy test.
Yeah.
And so number 3, an appreciation for Adolf Hitler and a belief the Nazis were misunderstood good guys in World War II.
Vast oversimplification of just about even the most pro, like Germany, we fought for the wrong side. Who was that, McCarthy?
Yeah.
I think who said that?
Well,
or was it Eisenhower?
Patton.
Oh, it was Patton.
Yeah.
He said, we fought for the wrong side. Okay,
but even somebody like post-war consensus, like mega hero, Churchill was basically like, we just turned over Eastern Europe to the commies.
And they're going to kill 100 million people. Oh, and they did. So it's like...
But my point is, like, you can't even ask a historical question. Number 1, appreciation for Adolf Hitler and the belief the Nazis were misunderstood good guys. I think that's a gross mischaracterization of what most people said. For example, Pat Buchanan makes the case that maybe things weren't as we think they were, but he never says, like, Hitler was great.
No, basically... You can go in, this is how history works. You can go in as something as destructive and wicked as a world war, and you can find absolute atrocities by all sides.
Yeah.
Like, it was absolutely morally atrocious that Churchill spent months firebombing civilians in Germany before Hitler ordered the bombing of London.
Yeah.
And in response to that, both of them were evil. It was absolutely morally atrocious for Adolf Hitler to sign off on the T4 genocide project that euthanized or killed mentally handicapped people. That was bad. It was bad. So I can go through all the cast of characters and I can call balls and strikes because I'm a Christian. And it doesn't mean that anybody I say bad things about is an absolute villain all the way down, or anybody I say good things about in one area or other is like an absolute hero. That's not history. That's just propaganda.
This is one of the worst things in this paragraph. He says, I know I haven't provided technical definitions of these isms or sought to substantiate my insinuation that all 3 are sinful and abhorrent, but that's the point. Most people don't need a lot of nuance to condemn anti-Semitism, racism, and Nazism. I'm like, Kevin, you're a Christian pastor who adheres to the Westminster standards, and you're telling me that you can call things sin without defining how they're sinful? You have lost your mind.
Yeah, particularly...
That is wicked and ungodly.
When the closer you get to defining them, like he does here in this paragraph, he actually ends up, I think unintentionally, I think he hasn't deeply thought about these things.
No.
I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt in saying that. I hope he hasn't, because genuinely it's asinine, the things he's saying there. It makes it worse. It makes it worse than not even defining them. To the degree that he tries to define them, he calls sin righteousness. He calls black, white, white, black, good, evil, evil, good.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And someone's going to pull that out and be like, yeah, Brian and Eric, they're going to do the same thing. You're going to say, look, here's the evidence. Brian and Eric are Nazi, racist, anti-Semite, misogynist idiots.
This comment, most people don't need a lot of nuance. Basically what he's saying is like, you don't even need to define these terms. They're self-evident. They're not self-evident.
East Asia has always been at war with, everybody knows
so horrible.
This. Question 2.
It's interesting that you get a commendation for Doug Wilson. Obviously the lines have shifted there. And I think it's just interesting that like Doug also has used these words and not really defined them.
Well,
that's the problem.
A case in point, and I brought this up during the black culture debate, is that if you just go read what Pastor Wilson has said in the past about things like the black American and white American kind of issue, he's said that he believes that white culture is superior to black culture. Unequivocally, he said this.
Doesn't he call it like Christian supremacy?
He ascribes it, and I believe there's a lot to be said about this, to the historic Christian influence in white European, Western European, Northern European culture. The Anglo-Protestant world is steeped for centuries, over a millennium in Christianity. So it's driven a lot of demons out. It's had a lot of effects. And so he says, of course, this is why white culture is superior. But notice that you're commending Doug. Pastor Deyoung is commending Doug here. But in that, Doug has actually said that blacks are inferior in some way to whites in terms of general culture.
I think he would have to say spiritually.
At the least spiritually. And he's talking broadly culturally.
Yeah.
I have screenshots of this you could pull up from Mablog. And I'm not criticizing Doug for saying that. I'm actually just saying be consistent.
Yeah.
Which is it? Are you allowed to do number 2 or are you not allowed to do number 2? Are you allowed to do number 1 in some case or with nuance or with demonstration and with seatbelts and things like reason and logic? Or are you not allowed to do number 1? Are you allowed to call balls and strikes in World War II and World War I and in Civil War and anything else, or are you not? And the answer for a Christian is, of course you are, because we're talking about what is true. And a Christian is required to seek to live at peace with what is true.
Yeah. No.
And hate lies, because Satan is the father of lies. So a normal, just broadly evangelical Christian would read that paragraph and they would go, of course Kevin's right. And this is the problem. This is why everybody dismisses us and our friends as oafish demagogues, is because, quite frankly, they haven't thought this through.
No.
Quite frankly, they have been discipled by the background assumptions of liberalism such that they have adopted that framework as a moral given, without ever critically examining it.
Part of it is the way propaganda works, right? If you just call somebody a racist 1,000 times, then the masses will believe that.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge problem. So question number 2, when and how does the nation act as a corporate moral person? You can just scroll down there, Jamie.
I think you did. It's just, we got a little delay on our screen.
Yeah,
there we go.
There's a lot of stuff here.
Corporate moral, I think we can deal with this pretty briefly.
Yeah. Basically, the conception is like a large group of people acting as an entity. I don't even think this should be that controversial. Entity. I mean, you look at the nation of Israel is in the Old Testament is treated this way, like God judges a nation.
Yeah, nations can wage just war or unjust war. Nations can enter covenants and not enter covenants. Nations. So there's some political theory, insider baseball. Stephen gets into this, like the Dabney quotes that he references.
I was going to say this is actually hilarious because he's quoting Dabney, who also held that slavery was fine.
Dabney held some spicy takes about black and white culture, we could say.
Yeah, he certainly did, and he's not going to bring those up.
You can get in trouble
keep going down.
in most of NAPARC for quoting Dabney positively at all. In terms of a corporate moral person, I think it's pretty uncontroversial in Christian history, especially Christian political thought, to say yes, nations can act as more, corporate moral persons. They can do good or do evil as an entity, and they can be dealt with as an entity. Again, I want to make a distinction between a nation and a country and kind of keeping those in line. A lot of our problems that we have stem from having muddled thinking about what a nation is, an ethnos, a people, and what a country is, a geopolitical entity with borders and a government of this arrangement or that arrangement, a monarchy or a representative republic or something like that. We get things wrong when we conflate those two things and act like they're absolute synonyms. They're actually not. Yeah,
this also gets into the Lockean conception that the power from God is actually given to the individuals. And I think that's just completely backwards.
Doesn't Stephen say that Locke said that in every individual has the right to wield the sword?
Yeah. Now, he says that he defers it to the civil magistrate.
Okay.
But again, what you find in Scripture is like, well, read Romans 13. It's not given to every individual.
No. It's given to the head of the nation, the minister of God's civil wrath or, approval.
And it's not just, Locke is arguing for what Kevin is arguing here. Rutherford would counter that. Rutherford would be on a different side with Lex Rex. But what's really interesting here is it's like, when I see Kevin bringing up, so which things should the magistrate legalize and make illegal? What's funny is it's like, it kind of shows how ignorant he is that this conversation's been going on for like 2,000 years and he's acting like it's never happened.
Yeah, like even his own whole argument, we brought it up in the cold open, but his whole argument that that government is because it has bad judgment, people have bad judgment.
Yeah.
That we've discovered that we shouldn't, because they have bad judgment, we shouldn't entrust the government with basically deciding really important questions, especially like religious ones. And the funny thing is that right there is a really important question that we're actually saying the government can answer, which is what is the government in charge of?
Yes.
They get to answer that question. They were apparently competent to judge that question.
Yes.
But just not any of these other ones when it comes to, stuff like, are we allowed to worship Hindu demon gods or the real one? That's way too hard. Like Trinity, triune, God of the Bible, Lord Jesus Christ, King of Kings, or Vishnu and her many-teated friend God, blue fatty lizard person. I can't even tell the difference because I'm so bad at judgment, guys. I can't tell the difference at which of those two things we should promote in America. Many-teated blue Indian lizard God or Jesus Christ. Like,
it's not hard.
It's Eric, these are difficult questions. What are you talking about?
His last line here, he says, "It seems to me then that nations can be called to account before God without insisting the government of those nations make declaratory statements about Christian doctrine or suppress non-Christian forms of religious expression." To which I would just say, see the entire Reformed tradition before 1960.
Also, just here's the support for that argument. It seems to Kevin. That's not an argument. That's a statement.
No.
The argument is, again, think of he has an operating system. It's modern liberalism. He's assuming it and then just saying, well, it seems obvious to me that
guys, it's obvious.
Can't decide between many-teated blue fat lizard Indian God and the Lord Jesus Christ as a nation because it seems to Kevin. And I'd go, your seamer is broken. Your seam chooser is busted. You should take it back. What's the return policy on Kevin's seamer? We need to figure this out so we can help him out and he can tell the difference between the many-teated blue lizard Indian God and the Lord Jesus Christ. Because I can tell. I mean, I don't have many degrees.
Well, Kevin, it seems to me.
I don't have a lot of... I'm not a smart man, but when I think of it, I think Jesus Christ, not the lizard God. That's just one guy's. It just seems to me though that's true.
Yeah,
it just seems to me.
So question number 3: what is the purpose of civil government? This is where he gets into his argument for limited government. You can keep scrolling down. So he's going to quote Dabney, and I think
bunch.
Stephen would just say, "Yeah, I disagree with Dabney," and it's kind of weird. Thomas Sowell, keep going. A lot of this is not an argument. It's just a bunch of fill. Maybe he was paid by the word. I don't know.
It's assuming a quasi-libertarian.
That's what it is. So he says this. He says, "I do not want government to direct its citizens to the highest heavenly good or to order society around true religion."
Oh, here we go.
"Because I do not trust the government to determine true religion from false religion, and because I do not trust human beings to wield this kind of authority well or wisely. Bear with me. I hold these convictions not in avoidance of Calvinist theology, but precisely because I am a Calvinist." That makes literally no sense.
Calvin's Geneva is am I a joke to you?
A reformed understanding of human nature should lead one to grant the civil magistrate less power in matters of religion, not more. I think kind of what he's doing here is being kind of retarded. The main problem is it's like the image of God thing where people are like, people are made in the image of God, therefore open borders. Right? He's saying total depravity, therefore anarchy. And it just simply does not follow. It's not a valid argument, but it doesn't follow from anything he said.
No, Eric, you're 100% right. What we're doing here is we're just saying nonsense that to somebody who has, and I cannot emphasize this enough, literally no idea what is going on in this conversation. They read that and go, man, that sounds really scholarly. But then you think because I'm a Calvinist, I refuse to do or believe anything that Calvinists did historically in terms of political theory. I'm sorry.
It just doesn't even make sense.
It's this is the most basic distinction. The Reformed understanding of human nature does mean that we don't grant the civil magistrate absolute power over all things to do whatever the heck they want at any point.
Which is funny because that's what our government does right now.
That's what it does now, like the judges. But what God does is he delineates that which is given to the ecclesiastical sphere in terms of its authority, that which is given to the civil magistrate. And the thing is, not he's talking about matters of religion, but civil law and custom are matters of religion.
Yes.
criminal law is a matter of religion. You can't just go to some magical fairy tale secularist neutrality land and then derive a bunch of civil laws that govern like what is a sin and what is a crime, and then say that was all not religious. And then we come over here and like whether we sing Chris Tomlin or old metrical settings of the Psalms, that's what religion is. And you're like, but what if religion actually encompasses the ecclesiastical, the personal, the familial, the civic? What if it encompasses all those things and just touches on them differently as they relate to those spheres? What if?
Yeah, and I think that the point that Stephen made that's really good here is he said, okay, so you're telling me your argument fundamentally is men are bad, therefore limited government. Men are bad, therefore let them to their own desires and let them do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Or, as our Christian fathers taught, men are bad, therefore a government should be virtuous and should direct its people to virtuous things.
Yes.
So an easy argument here would be like pornography. I've
Great
heard
point.
Like Toby Sumpter argue, because he's kind of on the libertarian spectrum, right? And love Toby, but thoroughly disagree. He's like, the government should not be involved at all with banning pornography. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Do I love my neighbor? Even if I have a pagan neighbor next door and I'm to love him, is it good for his soul for him to be consumed by pornography?
Yeah.
And I would say, no. The best way to love my neighbor is to have a godly magistrate who says, absolutely not. In our country, there will be no smut. There will be no filth. We will not allow it on our airwaves. We will not allow it on your smartphone. Yeah. We will make the production of pornography illegal because we want what's good for our people. So this concept of serving the public good, you can't do it without promoting piety.
No, and the civil magistrate can't just think like, well, in a properly ordered society, the father would do that. Therefore, we should have nothing to do with it. Like, yes, in a properly ordered Christian society, fathers would ensure that their children did not look at pornography. However, as a Christian, I'm not just concerned with my family where there's a father and a mother. I love my children. I'm aware of these things. I'm paying attention. I have Christian morality. I'm ensuring that they don't have access to pornography very easily. But what about my neighbor? What about like the average family in America? How are they doing? Well, we know how they're doing. They're all addicted to pornography. They're all using it. And in fact, it's like fentanyl for the brain. Like they're all out there bathed in pornography and a million other things that a godly magistrate would remove even from the option of them having access to. It would be like saying, well, it's okay if there's a prostitute on every street corner in America because in a virtuous society, nobody would go use them. So they'd go out of business. Yeah, but did you also know that's actually a crime and we could just say, and we'll put you in prison if you try to prostitute yourself on the street corner?
When you think about how the law works, like think about the simple family law.
Yeah.
Right? One of your kids says to you, Dad, I'm going to eat 32 pounds of chocolate tonight.
Okay.
And you say to him, well, I want to respect your conscience and your freedom to determine for yourself the meaning of the universe.
As a father, I could be wrong because fathers are sometimes make bad judgments.
No, and what we do is we say, and this, like, it shouldn't even be rocket science. What we say is, no, that's stupid. You will damage yourself. I'm not going to allow you to do it. And then here's the thing. They could say, yeah, but I want to.
Oh, but they want to, Eric. What about their Lockean individual liberty?
What about their tabula rasa?
What about their blank slateitude, where they're just born as this moral blank slate, and they just we kind of write some stuff on them, that sort of thing.
But this is actually why God in Romans 13 has given the law is to punish evil. That's one of the components of it. So actually, what I want to be promoting is godly civil magistrates, ministers, godly magistrates who enact godly laws. So one of the things that strikes me as interesting is you think about, I was listening under Obama to one of his State of the Union addresses.
Okay.
And he's like, here's what the government's going to fix. Here's what it's going to change. And Brian, I'm not kidding you. He went through the healthcare of children, vaccines, education, middle school education, the math curriculum. I mean, they went through the economy. They went through every sphere of human life. Yeah. And the U.S. government was like, we are in charge of all of it.
Yeah.
You should have heard that and been like, they think they're God.
I totally do.
And that's where liberalism has brought us, is to that sort of technocratic hellscape state. And then here, what we're told is, yeah, you know what would be really bad? This is what Kevin's saying. You know what would be really, really evil and bad and would lead to bad things? If like a Christian got elected and he started making Christian laws.
If Christians did that. Like if a Christian got elected, and this is the irony of the whole thing. What percentage of our current Congress claims to be Christian? I think it's over 70%. And they're like, but could we, could we promote via the educational curriculum and via law and custom Christian morality upon and stop telling kids that they are descended from apes and that they're all evolved from rock soup that was struck by lightning and the details aren't important. So basically they're meaningless lizard descendants but we couldn't say any of that because that would be to impose our religion. And I would say, well, actually,
and have a happy Diwali.
What you just described is imposing your religion. A lot of this actually comes back to the Warren Court. Now, Stephen mentioned the Warren Court decisions a lot in his episode, but I'm not going to belabor it a lot. But the Warren Court is this court under Chief Earl Warren, I think is his name. He was appointed by Eisenhower, who later called it one of his worst decisions. So he's like a conservative chief justice. It was like 53 to 1969 that he was the chief justice. They made a series of decisions around the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. What is the first word, Eric, of the First Amendment Establishment Clause?
Congress.
I'm so glad you got it. I was really worried there for a second. What the First Amendment Establishment Clause is trying to do is say this and no more. That the federal government was not going to establish one Christian denomination. At this time, it was very common in the states to have establishment religious tests of different levels in all sorts of other questions, but the founders didn't want one Christian denomination established in America that would then bind the conscience or legally bind all the other states. So they were saying states can go and they can do their own thing in terms of Christian religion and things like that. But it wasn't really intended to establish like this hard wall of separation between the church and the state like we have today. So how do we get that? Well, believe it or not, it wasn't the first 200 years of America.
But Kevin DeYoung said it was 250 years.
Joseph's story from the cold open.
Yeah.
He was espousing the normal position at the time in 1860 that it wasn't the First Amendment wasn't given to protect like Mohammedism and multiculturalism and all this stuff. It was to prevent warfare between different sects of Christianity.
Right.
So you have rulings like this. This is what the Warren Court decided. And they slowly chipped away at the ability to legally practice Christianity in any kind of civic or educational way. 1962, Engel versus Vitale. Engel, what kind of name is that?
Well, Frederick Engels. I'm just doing the math here.
What do you think Steve was? Old Steve Engel of Engel versus Vitale.
Scandinavian.
Surprisingly, you'd be wrong. He was a Jew.
What?
And he was a practicing Jew. And he brought suit and said, along with many Jewish legal organizations at the time in 1962, believe it or not, and they said, in this school, my child goes to this public school and they have this voluntary Christian prayer. It's not like specifically denominational. It's not Anglican or Baptist or whatever, but it was Christian, Jesus, and it was a Christian prayer in the school. Goes all the way to the Warren Court. And what does the Warren Court say? Did they say, well, yeah, Christian schools, you're in America. American schools were Christians. Like, we're going to have Christian prayer. Believe it or not, no. They actually said that's illegal. The First Amendment forbids that. Which it doesn't. A series of decisions, that was just one of them. There were a series of decisions until we had removed not just prayer, but any Christian scripture, all sorts of things, until literally you couldn't even have at a football game somebody praying, a public prayer at a football game anymore. It's against the First Amendment. So the Warren Court, this post-war 1950s, 1960s court, establishes a completely new constitutional order when it comes to the First Amendment Establishment Clause on America. And they don't just tinker with, they fundamentally change the original intent of the Constitution with respect to that point. They end up making it do the opposite of what it was supposed to do in a way, because they establish on a federal level the religion of secular humanism. I've been having a problem with my friend Ben.
That's raw Ben Nationalist to you.
I'm sorry, my friend Raw Ben Nationalist. See, he doesn't trust those big box soap companies with all their nasty chemicals.
That's right. Gotta keep my T levels high.
Right, which has led him to do things like not shower for days at a time. But luckily, I just got some of that new Indigo Sundry soap.
Ew, keep that away from me.
No, Ben, this soap is different. It's made from all natural ingredients and none of that nasty, harmful stuff. And so now my friend Raw Ben Nationalist here.
That's Mr. Sir Reginald Ben Esquire III. Thank you very much.
So now Mr. whatever his name is can shower in confidence. And so can you if you head to indigosundrysoap.com and pick yours up today. And hey, if you subscribe to any of their bundles or soaps, you get an automatic 10% off all your orders.
Delightful.
Okay.
Well, even with something like Brown v. Education, Board of Education, and the forced busing of, in the South especially, somebody shared a photo of this recently, and it was Eisenhower sending in the troops to force more segregation. So you're bringing in black students into the white schools. And it was so popular, believe it or not, you had to enforce it at gunpoint.
Yeah, wow.
But you think
surprising.
And then Christopher Caldwell gets into this, but he said the problem is it destroyed freedom of assembly, which is also guaranteed. It actually deleted, and now it says, no, you're actually not free to assemble with whomever you want at all. Women need to be put into male spaces. Yeah. All the races have to be smooshed together.
And by the time we're done with all of this bureaucratic empire of soft Marxist, Gramscian Marxist, secular humanist liberalism, not only do you have anything the government touches when it comes to like education, government services, things like that, not only do they prevent any kind of Christian flavor to any of that and enforce the religion of secularism, they then, through corporate regulation, end up making it impossible for businesses to even engage in these constitutional rights. And so pretty soon you have the complete demolition of the constitutional order that largely Christians instituted for the sake of their Christian nation.
Isn't that great?
And this is the irony, is that people think that the founders were these like religious pluralists. They're like, oh, and they'll quote, there were some guys there that were wrong about a lot. Like Thomas Jefferson, for example, total like bad guy on a lot of levels when it comes to some of the ideas here. But go look at like John Adams. Go look at what he had to say.
Patrick Henry.
Go look at George Washington. Go look at like, we were a Christian nation with a Christian constitution. And I love what Stephen said on this point in his episode. He was talking about how I suspect, can't prove it, but I suspect that if you could have shown a movie of what was going to be happening in 2025 in America and kind of explain to them briefly, this is what they did with the First Amendment, and this is what they did, I think they would have put some more language in there.
Yeah.
I think they would have said like, oh, and by the way, no Mohammedans. But at that time, was there a real big question of whether or not they were going to let in a bunch of Barbary pirates to rape and pillage?
No, and this is the thing actually until, even 1960, 90% of Americans were WASPs.
Yeah.
They were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And it wasn't until the mid-60s, 64, 65, you get Hart Celler, Emmanuel Celler, also working for the Jewish Congress.
I don't believe it.
Yep.
And you're an anti-Semite, but go ahead.
I know, because I pointed out something that was true.
Let me get
it's
that
on
in.
Kevin's list.
That is saying that there's a secret cabal, and I will have, in fact, I'm on record right now. I denounce Eric Kahn.
I denounce Eric Kahn. Here's the thing. I don't think the cabal is so secret anymore.
It's not.
But if we could go to question number 4 now on that.
Yeah,
note,
what do we got? I'm just losing myself in rants.
I know. What does it mean for the civil magistrate to promote the true religion?
What if they, hear me out, looked at 2 pictures, and one of them was a many-teated blue Indian lizard goddess, and one of them was, now, second commandment violation.
I don't know why you have to say teated.
The Lord Jesus Christ. Because I look at their gods and they're all many-teated. Like they've got all these sex organs all over them. Okay. And then you had like Lord Jesus Christ. Like, okay, I said picture, I'm sorry, second commandment violation, etc. And you said, here's what I want. I want the Christian magistrate to be able to look at those 2 pictures and not say they're the same picture.
Yeah.
I want them to look and be like, this is America. Get that many-teated blue Indian lizard goddess out of here. That's what I want. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. And if you scroll down, Jamie, great work.
killing it.
So much of this, and he kind of has these lists of like, what does it mean to promote? And
Let's look at that. Let's stop there.
yeah, right there.
Dude, there's some good stuff here.
So I just want to read this from James Baird because this is the classic reform position. He says, by promote, this is in his book, page 3. So you don't even have to get very deep.
Dude, you just have to read 3 pages and you would have known.
Kevin
you would have known.
You would have known.
3 pages deep, man.
He says, by promote, I mean the activity of encouraging, supporting, advancing, or furthering the progress of something. And then he goes into his list.
Okay.
So it's really anything to support the public good, which would be the promotion of Christianity. And he says, the welfare of the people shall be the supreme law, quoting from Cicero's famous Latin phrase, which I'm not going to attempt to say. In short, the government does not exist for the sake of itself. Rather, it exists for the sake of the common good. You cannot promote the common good without promoting Christian religion.
Yeah, so that would be things like, for example, are we going to allow a city to, I don't know, have a bunch of Muslim immigration and then like Muslims to establish a city in America?
No.
No, we're not. Are we going to allow them to build like a 600-foot tall gold warrior god Hindu statue? This one's not many teeted, I think, but like, no, we're not going to. Let's look at some of his questions.
Yeah, so some of these, I think, do you believe that the civil magistrate must take order that the unity and peace be preserved in the church? Do you believe that the civil magistrate must take order so that the truth of God be kept pure and blameless? I would say to some of these, this would kind of be my answer at this point. As long as you distinguish the spheres.
It depends how you
It depends how you define these. But like in general, yes. If toward the bottom there, do you believe that the civil magistrate has power to call ecclesiastical synods? You see the sort of...
Oh, yeah.
So some of them, what I would say with this is, I think what's happening is, in some extent, Kevin is confusing like what the roles the state would play in some of those things.
And he's made it all about the Westminster Confession 1646-47 versus the 1788 American Revision.
Yeah. So, and then he'll go into that,
which is just to locate that we're talking about even much, much more basic things than some of these things.
Yes. This would be like, I would say, like getting down into the weeds of how it would actually function.
Sure.
But one of the points Stephen made here was that he's actually not making an argument about political philosophy.
No.
He's just saying, thus says the Westminster Confession 1646.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, 1788. Thus saith the Lord. That's kind of the end of the story.
Right.
This is the same thing as when you say, you ask me, well, what should the government do in this situation? And I say, Brian, I have a Calvinist worldview.
Okay.
I know the answers.
Really? Mm-hmm. I see. Just because that Calvinist worldview.
That's literally it.
That's all you need.
That's all I got.
Yeah, this is real.
You still have to do
stuff.
the legwork of working out your political principles.
Yeah, we're talking about like we're down at the 18th line of the eye chart where the letters are all tiny and like such. I'm talking about like the first 4 lines would be a great starting point for Christian nationalism. Like, let's say that this is a Christian nation. All right, great. Let's say that we are not going to allow the public promotion of false religion. And by that, we don't mean like various sects of Christianity are going to start fighting over like, well, the Presbyterians can't have Sunday worship. We're just going to say big obvious things like, but Muhammad was wrong. Or the many-teated blue Indian lizard goddess was wrong. We're going to say that. Like that. Those are not difficult questions.
So if you scroll down, yeah, that's exactly right. And he'll kind of get into the last paragraph. Yeah, he says, I believe the magistrate ought to maintain piety, justice, and peace. Okay, but that doesn't seem to be what he's advocating for. And I believe he accomplishes his ends by protecting the church without giving preference to denomination. Skipping down, likewise, I believe the civil magistrate must not enact any laws that interfere with the due exercise of the church government, discipline, and worship.
Okay.
In short, I believe the magistrate may not in the least interfere in matters of faith.
Yeah, but again, he's just dodging the whole question. It's so convenient to dodge this whole question because to answer it is highly controversial in our age and would immediately make Kevin Deyoung have to be really courageous in order to say some true things.
Well, and basically what he's doing too is saying, it's like, you ask me, how should the Christian magistrate rule? And I say, let me tell you what it can't do. And you're like, okay, but...
It can't tell me what wine to use for communion, Brian, well, that's not what we were saying. What about the many-teated blue Indian lizard goddess? Because we were talking about that. What about, like, hear me out. What if we said this is a Christian nation and Christians, you know, there's some stuff about usury in there. And so, like, no more of that. Or what about, like, what if we said no more synagogues because we can't have any blasphemous, Christ-rejecting false religion established in America?
Yeah.
What if we said that?
What if we didn't appoint a czar of anti-Semitism to root out anti-Semitism in America?
That's where you lost me. See, I think that could be a really important position
I bet.
for one of our guys to get himself appointed as and then do the funniest thing possible. Okay? I'm just saying, if you're in a position,
Here's what
maybe you're going to have to be creative on your resume.
Here that you appoint me to that position.
I accept the position.
You appoint Brian to that position, and then immediately he bans the ADL.
I have determined that the true Semites are those who worship the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we're going to get rid of the Talmud is outlawed. No more Talmud. In fact, burn all the copies. You can't have it anymore. Have you read what's in this thing? Like in history, you know the story about in the Middle Ages? I can't remember where it was.
This is like Rome discovers the Talmud.
Yeah, it was like that. But there was a Jew who converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
And then he went and told the Christians, he was like, hey, do you guys know what's in the Talmud? And they were like, nah, dude, I'm not reading all that because it's huge. It's like a James White Twitter response. Okay. So they're like, I'm not reading all that. And I probably shouldn't have said that. And so he's like, well, read this section, this section, this section, and this section. And they did. And they were like, this is the worst book I've ever. We need to outlaw this. And they passed a law and they like burned all the Talmuds because it was so evil. And what I'm saying, and follow me here, that was a good idea. We should do that. That we should burn all the porn. We should burn all the Talmuds. We should stop. Like, why?
Have you ever gone to like the public library? In the children's section?
I saw in one of the GCs I'm in, someone linked to the Libs of TikTok account, and one of the books that's in the library, I don't even go try to find it because it's so foul. It was horrible.
The library here, like my wife, when they would go for school, like she would send photos of the books in there. And it's like,
how do we get them?
Such and such Civil War soldier, the first transgender. Because this lady like dressed up as a union, she fought for the union, not surprisingly.
We need to make book burnings great again.
Yes.
We need to make book burnings great again. This to me is like obvious stuff. I know that, but here's my point, is that it doesn't cost Kevin Deyoung anything to argue about insider baseball with respect to establishmentarianism in the 1646 versus the 1788 revision. There's no risk there because there's virtually no usefulness there. Establishmentarians today are like, I'm an establishmentarianism, but I'm against Christian nationalism. It's like, yeah, you're imagining this utopia in the hypothetical future with absolutely no way to get from point A, where we are today, to point 673C, where there's this Christian establishment. Oh, you're for that hypothetical imaginary land that is never going to happen, but you won't take any political action today. You're on the 27th line of the seeing chart with the little numbers and letters and stuff. We're trying to say, what if America could read the big E on the first line? What if we could read the many-teated blue Indian lizard goddess?
What's funny too is like just putting this in perspective. Do you remember after Charlie Kirk how there were churches who like just kept expositional preaching and they were like, we're not going to talk about this, it's too controversial?
Yeah.
I heard from people who actually go to the series of, there's a couple of them, Kevin Deyoung churches in that area, and they were like, yeah, it was not mentioned. So it kind of goes back to that same thing. Like you're just trying to stay out of the heat
because it doesn't cost you anything.
It costs
to talk
you
about
nothing.
Westminster Confession.
No.
It would cost you something to say, I don't know. The U.S. government should say that Jesus Christ is Lord. The U.S. government should make Christian laws. Even if you didn't, like, even if Kevin Deyoung got to say, like, a bunch of the first table of the law stuff, blah, 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 blah. But I'm just saying, like, what if we could just throw off the liberal frame and this libertarianism altogether and just at least start with, like, something? That costs you. The second you start to say almost anything, it's wildly costly today to be a public figure whose name is on the internet saying these things. Ask me how I know.
Ask me how I know.
But it doesn't cost you anything. Do you think anybody would have ever made a death threat to me from saying, like, now, I agree with the 1788 revision because I do not believe that the civil government has the authority to call a synod. And your neighbor's like, bro, could you quiet down? I'm trying to watch my tranny kids cartoons.
Ew.
You know what I'm saying?
That's gross.
Anyway,
Speaking of gross, question 5. Was the First Amendment a mistake? He says, if I only had one question to ask a proponent of Christian nationalism, this would be my first. What do you believe about the First Amendment?
We talked a lot about it.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about this. He seems to be supporting the quote unquote principle of religious freedom enshrined. Right, it's enshrined. Nobody thought that until like 1960, but apparently it was enshrined.
It was enshrined, Eric.
And then he goes on to say, I'm talking about the original intent. Okay, if you scroll down, my interest. Yeah, and then he engages with Doug Wilson. You can just like scroll through this. It's basically nothing. It's a big nothing burger. Keep going. American Constitution. Okay, that last paragraph. Religious freedom was the evolution of a Protestant idea that at the time of the founding was not limited to the Protestants. And this is to say nothing of the presence today of millions of Mormons, Oneness Pentecostals, and Jehovah's Witnesses, all of whom are not Christians by any historic standard. If Christian nationalists believe the First Amendment only protects Orthodox Protestants and maybe begrudgingly Catholics and Jews, definitely not Jews. Catholics, okay.
I do not believe some of what he just said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then surely these newer heretical groups should be suppressed. I suggest, however, as an American and as a Christian, that the better way, oh, thank goodness for the better way, Kevin. Holy art thou, my friend. The better way has come. We never had a better way until Kevin Deyoung. The better way is here to pray, to preach, and to proselytize for the conversion of these religious groups while also defending their right to exercise their false religion during this temporal.
Where does God in his word, like what would give you the idea
Oh my gosh.
that God would have in a society largely constructed of Christians for the Christians to establish a right to exercise a false religion, particularly when it comes to its public expression? What biblical principle would you build that on? And how would you overcome, I don't know, the Old Testament? I've read the whole thing more than once.
So basically what he's arguing for is
Multiple translations.
Religious pluralism.
Yeah, and he's saying it's like a product. Okay, now there's, again, like a lot of this, there are some core truths that are mixed in with a bunch of horse manure. And yeah, the freedom of religion, as it was written into the First Amendment, is a very Protestant thing. Of course, because if you look at Catholic Christendom, Roman Catholic Christendom, it wasn't really a question. They were Roman Catholic nations.
Burn him.
So the Protestants did have a concern. They were like, hey, we don't want to have a big street fight to decide whether the Presbyterians, the Anglicans are in charge of the federal government. But they wanted to be able to gather to voluntarily, by the way, and freely gather into states, cities, communities, institutions, and be Anglican, Presbyterian, and write those rules in everything they did and not have them legally cordoned off from all civic and public life. Yeah, that's true. But the idea that like it is an absolute Protestant value that we would defend the public exercise of false religion. And then people do this really dumb thing to try to prove this. Why didn't Paul tell so-and-so, why didn't he tell any of the Roman governors, or why didn't he tell Nero or any of the emperors to establish Christianity? You're telling me that Paul was so dumb that he thought, you know what, now's the time in history. There are 1,600 Christians in Corinth. There are 1.2 million people total. It's time to try to establish Christianity. We're not talking about that. We're talking about after the leaven of the gospel has gone through the nations, and you have whole nations that have converted and are attempting to establish Christian orders on a civic realm and obey the instructions of God to the magistrate in Romans 13 and in 1 Peter and these sorts of things, and say, what would a just Christian society look like with respect to its criminal, civil law, and customs and all these things? And I would submit to you that in that time in history, it would be appropriate to say no Mormon temples, no Hindu. I'm not going to say it again. No minarets and no whatever the heck they call them. What's
Menorahs.
Menorahs. You know, Doug said no minarets, but you could have mosques.
Yeah.
I say no mosques, no minarets. That's where we differ. No Muslim calls to prayer. Now, what that does not mean, it doesn't entail this at all, is that the Christian magistrate is going to go around, some soldier, police officer is going to go around and say, become a Christian or capital punishment.
What's funny
it doesn't entail that.
About all of this, like if you look at the laws in Israel, which I was doing, somebody asked me this question, like, are you allowed to proselytize as a Christian in Israel?
Look it up.
And it's interesting. The technical answer is yes, but it's sort of like yes, and we will get rid of you.
It's like, are you allowed to smoke in the airport? Yes. They have this room in some of them, way off over yonder. It has 70 shag carpet and a dog has pooped in it. Can you smoke there? Yes.
Yeah, so like in Israel today, and this is why I'm drawing the comparison, because so many people are like pro-Zion, pro-Israel. We love everything going on in Israel. And they're extremely ethno-nationalist, if I may use that phrase. But even with Christianity, like, no, you can't go open a ministry to proselytize Jews.
Yeah.
And I actually, like, can you do that in the UAE? No, you may not do that in a Muslim country.
They will put you in prison.
And nobody freaks out about that in Israel, and really not in the UAE either.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's liberals don't criticize Muslims because that's a conservative thing to do. So they've got this whole agreement where they like Muslim terrorism. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen it. Are you Islamophobic? No, I've seen what they've done. I've read the books.
So
I've seen it.
That going back to that last sentence, like a Christian nation, no, we would not be supporting this promotion or defense of the quote unquote right to freely exercise false religions in our country.
No.
Now, I think generally, correct me if I'm wrong, where this would have fleshed out is like, if you're in Ogden and you have let's say there's like a Muslim who's quietly practicing in his home, he's reading the Quran or something.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to go do a police raid on his house.
No.
Now, are we going to allow in our city the mass building of mosques?
Are we going to allow a building permit to be issued for a mosque? No.
Absolutely not. 100% no.
It is a forbidden use of a building in
You can even look at like Israel
America.
and like for the Kings, like they were graded on like they did pretty good, but they didn't tear down the high places.
They left the high places. See, but what we've discovered, we've learned this since, is that was actually good of them, because we've learned that the government's not very good at making those decisions.
Yeah, religious pluralism really played out well. That was
in the history
of Israel.
The thing was, Israel's special. Like Old Testament Israel, there's a lot there that when you read it, you can ignore it, unless it has to do with immigration, and then you have to welcome the foreigner. But that's like we're theonomists. Then we're immigration theonomists while not aggressively misunderstanding those immigration laws. But when it comes to a lot of other stuff, like that was then, this is now. You know what I'm saying, Eric?
Oh,
Try
yeah.
to keep up with me.
I'm trying to keep up.
It's a complex theological and cultural argument built around anachronism and various intentional misunderstandings.
It actually sounds a lot like question number 6.
It does.
What is the historical example of the political order you would like to see in America? Here come the cards on the table. For my part, I think the political order established at the American founding with its threefold cord, just like a trinity, a holy trinity.
It's crazy how the government was able to discern this difficult question and determine that Lockean liberalism, classical republicanism, and Protestant Christianity was worth preserving and celebrating.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, Miles Charcuterie makes an appearance.
Charcuterie the fourth? He didn't even use fourth.
I didn't notice. He's the fourth. How do I know which Miles Smith you're talking about?
I also like Miles Smith's argument for Christian institutionalism and his contention that religion in the early American Republic was disestablished, but not disentangled.
And there's a lot of truth to that. I'm joking, but there's a lot of truth to, again, federally especially, Christian America was not founded on establishment.
What's funny about this is
they're very entangled.
He begins to critique Christian nationalists because he says there's a wide range. They don't even agree. I'm like, Kevin, look at the conservative movement.
We have
does anybody say we can't even talk about conservatism because people disagree?
No.
I mean, it's an asinine point.
Or like, what does it mean to be reformed?
So then
people disagree on that.
He mentions, and rightly so, like you have medieval Christendom, you have the magisterial reformers, American founding, Kuyperianism. But then I'm not really sure. Once again, he doesn't really make an argument. He just says,
yeah.
But let's be real, Locke was the best.
The idea.
Keep going down, yeah.
Yeah, keep going. I want to let you cook here.
Kuyper. Again, he'll quote all these guys that like would vehemently disagree with him on all of this. Okay, last one. He goes to Bavinck, social issues. If Reformed Christians today wish to do theological retrieval, we should do it as Kuyper and Bavinck did and admit when our forefathers got something wrong. I've seen this play a lot, Brian, with a lot of moderns. And what they try to do is they say, there was a lot of things. There was Kuyperianism. It's all so muddled. We can never really know. But I tell you what we can know. John Locke, baby.
The timeless politics of Jesus.
Yeah.
It turns out it's just 1960s liberalism.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We've now come to the pinnacle of wisdom. And we've determined that all of these better men than us who went before, they just hadn't reached. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, gay Jewish giants.
The funny thing is, though, it's like if you had like, let's just say
Marxist giants.
Kuyperianism, the medieval period, or the magisterial reformers, I would take any of those three over what we have today. But then Kevin concludes with this. This is like an Obama campaign slogan. His conclusion is the politics of possibility.
Before you do that, do you remember the meme?
Which one?
Where it's the two guys standing in front of the button, and he's like, if you push this button, we're going to go back to the politics of the magisterial reformers or any of those groups. And then the guy starts smashing the button. He's like, but wait, we won't have the treasures of queerdom in the New Jerusalem. And he's like, push it harder.
Push the button harder.
But wait, you're telling me we'll lose all of the glories of Lockean liberalism.
What was the David French line? Like the blessings of liberty?
Yes. The blessings of liberty.
He was talking about transgender story time. These are the blessings of liberty.
It was David French.
David French.
It was David French onion soup.
French onion soup. Yeah. So then he concludes... keep going down. More nonsense. No arguments.
I think people think that, back to his point 4 originally, I think that he thinks that we're all juvenile because we laugh at them when they say dumb stuff. As I'm reflecting on this episode, I think that might be where that comes from. Maybe it's because, is it the many-teethed Indian blue lizard goddess, Kevin? But it's a real question. I'm asking sincerely, which, I want my government to be able to tell the difference.
This is kind of his final conclusion. He says, I am all for that in spades, meaning Christian institutions, ideas in the public square, all that.
Me too.
And Christians in power. What I am not for is asking the civil magistrate to adjudicate questions it is not competent to answer. We've shown how stupid this is. To wield power, it cannot be trusted to exercise, but that God gave it. And everyone thought that God gave it for thousands of years. And to fulfill duties that infringe upon the liberty of a free people.
And here's the fundamental absurdity of that whole conclusion, is that what Kevin is asking us to do is to believe that the government that he imagines is able to do all the stuff he lists in this religiously neutral way.
Yeah.
It literally cannot be done. It will be one God or another. And you know what the God of the system is when you try to do it in terms of Lockean individualism, and his name is Satan. Okay, his name is Satan, and he has a lot of different versions of his lie. Some of them are Hindu, some of them are Buddhist, some are Islamic, some are whatever. But fundamentally, the God of this age is the one that he's asking to be in charge of the political system. And what we're saying is, no, God really did make a world where men can learn through wisdom and repentance and the application of obedience to his word to the real life that they live in. Men can learn obedience and wisdom and actually govern justly. Not perfectly, until the eschaton, not perfectly until the resurrection. Of course not. But can they do it better than some other time? Can they learn to do it better? Can we promote that? Can we pursue that? Of course we can. That's what Kevin's trying to do too. He's just trying to do it through the establishment of one national religion, and that is satanic secular liberalism.
Yeah, it's also interesting if Kevin would go back and read like the French Revolution.
Oh,
and the ideologies that came out of that.
You'd love the French Revolution. You haven't heard of it? Oh, Kevin,
you would love
the
it.
French Revolution.
Trust me. But that's basically like he's advocating for post-revolution thought. This is why in Europe, even guys like Franco, they were like, this whole democracy project, it's for communists. Yeah. This is how communists subvert and overtake a country.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. And the only way to stop it was guys like Franco in Spain who basically said, absolutely not. The communists are not in charge.
Yeah.
We're going to fight, to the hilt against that.
Yeah.
And we're going to establish, and in their country, it was Roman Catholic, but we're going to establish a Christian order.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. No, we don't want mosques in our country.
No, absolutely not. I'm not interested in it, and I don't think God is interested in it. And it's not in any way contradictory to the clear principles of Scripture. What it's contradictory to is a muddled reading of Scripture where you constantly collapse and conflate individual responsibilities with ecclesiastical authority, with civic authority, with all these different things. But if we just think clearly and read the Scriptures, I don't think a lot of the again, we're not trying to get down to the 27th line on the eye chart, what with the tiny letters and stuff. We're trying to do like the first 1, 2, 3, or 4 lines, the big letters. Like Christianity or not.
Yeah. I want to ask you, just summarizing all of this, why do you think so many Christians, and there were a lot of Reformed guys, why do you think so many people were quick to read this article and say something like, what a truly helpful article from Kevin Deyoung. I have just been so helped. Because I read this and I'm like, this is slop.
Oh, yeah.
This is not helpful.
No, this
it's not good.
This was actively harmful, this article. And one of the reasons it's so actively harmful is because it has a veneer of legitimacy.
Yeah.
It has a veneer of scholarly legitimacy because it's Kevin Deyoung. I mean, he's senior pastor at Christ Covenant Church PCA in Matthews, North Carolina. He's the associate professor of systematic theology at RTS. He's referencing the Westminster Confession. He quoted Dabney. How many quotes from Kuyper? He talked about Bavinck. I mean, he talked about the 1788 American Revision. Surely people will listen to reason now that an adult has entered the room.
That's really what people were saying.
But when you analyze the arguments, when you give them the slightest feather poke, turns out they were just wind. There wasn't much substance to them. There was a lot of confusion about basic categories. There was a lot of obfuscation and refusal to deal with the strongest arguments of the position. There was active points where the logical, almost inescapable conclusion of what Kevin is promoting in this argument ends up being something that, in my view, is obviously evil. Not even like,
which is
real debate. Like when he's talking about how we can't make like any judgment. We should rule out from the beginning any judgment about cultures, or we should dismiss as anti-Semites these people.
Yeah.
Or we should,
the idea that the government is basically so
incompetent to do anything.
What you're saying is that God created an institution, a role, that is worthless.
Yeah, basically it's totally muddled. And at the same time, in an incoherent and self-contradictory way, it is able to adjudicate this complex political philosophy of Locke and apply that to society. Oh, and that actually turns out to be like the apotheosis of Protestant political theology is like Lockean individualism. And I just go, really? That's the best that a Reformed Christian and a son of the Westminster divines can do? I think that's absurd. I think it's actually kind of sad that Kevin Deyoung, who is far more studied and degreed than me, would write this.
Yeah.
And I'm just a guy in Utah reading this and going, how did he not see these objections?
Don't you think part of it too is for all the guys who were falling over themselves trying to congratulate Kevin for this article? I think part of it is a lot of guys just want to be seen as respectable at this table. And I love the line from Calvin Robinson. He said, a lot of you are trying to get seats at tables you were sent to overturn.
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of Christian establishment that makes so many Americans not trust their pastor.
It functions as a political wing for the liberal revolution in America.
Yes.
The religious wing. It functions as the religious wing for the revolution of secular liberalism in America, which is what we talked about in the post-war consensus episode, where it's like the post-war consensus invents a novel Christian theological apparatus that is thinly Christian, but it's really just the repackaging of all sorts of other things like Lockean individualism and libertarianism and a bunch of other stuff, and then saying, and religious pluralism and Marxism, and then saying, this is what Christians have always believed. Westminster Confession, Bavinck, Kuyper, da-da-da. Look, I'm so scholarly. And you just go, you're so scholarly that Calvin would have laughed you out of the room if you presented this argument to him.
Yeah.
It unquestionably to me.
I think it's also interesting as we close, like as we respond to this, I know there will be critics who will say, why are pastors responding to this?
Oh.
But they won't say, why did a pastor write that?
Why are pastors? I'm just a guy, I'm a guy in Utah. You're a guy in Utah.
I'm a guy.
We're interested in stuff, important stuff. Hear me out. I want for my children and grandchildren not to die in a gay, libertarian, egalitarian, feminist, Marxist hellscape. I want them to have a country and a people, and I want that to be a Christian country and a Christian nation, a Christian people. That's what I want for their sake. And so I'm interested in this stuff as a man, as a father, as a Christian, and yeah, as a pastor who pastors people. But I'm not just interested in this in some theological and theoretical way. I want my kids to have a nation. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. I want to do good to them.
Yeah, and I think this goes to kind of how deep the problem with the post-war consensus goes in shaping. You talked about an alien theological apparatus.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when Kevin Deyoung was writing a book with Ted Kluck called, Why We're Not Emergent by Two Guys Who Should Be. Because they were kind of countering the emergent church movement. You remember when it's like the early OOs, when that was happening. It's interesting to me that there's certain things that people could see and say, whoa, emergent church, not good.
Yeah.
And they're like the discernment eyes were good.
Yeah.
But this one is so nefarious and so deep in the culture. And I don't mean that it's theologically deep, because this is not. But what I mean is you have these pre-rational arguments. Mm-hmm. They're before you even thought of anything, this was in your bones.
It seems to me.
And it's also interesting because if you look at the Marxist playbook and the Open Society guys, Karl Popper, et cetera, they said one of the first things that we need to do is we need to control the education institutions so that people will be catechized and brainwashed in this sort of thinking.
They won't even realize that they're operating from conclusions that they chose.
I just want to encourage our listeners. If you're listening and you're like, I'm not sure where you guys are getting this, I would just say, with Kevin's argument, if you go back and you say, just ask this question, what if this is wrong? What if Locke was wrong?
Yeah.
What if actually the founders thought something different of the First Amendment? I think part of intelligence for people is starting with questions and saying, well, hold on. They're calling everybody an anti-Semite. Why?
Why does that keep coming up?
Who invented that?
Yeah, where does that language come from?
And why was it a Jew?
Why was the 1962 court case angle? Why was that? Why did all of these Jewish lobbies and again, people look at them again. They're bringing everything back to the Jews and blah 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 blah. But I just want to know actually what is true.
And I think
where did these ideas come from?
That's what I'm getting at is part of what he's saying is he's actually forbidding a certain kind of intellectual curiosity that is necessary for wise people to live in their world
and rule rightly.
and rule rightly.
Yeah.
So that's what I would encourage people is just like do the research, do the reading. The number of people that read Stephen's book and were like, you had one group who was like, wow, that's actually this is what the Reformer said. I checked. But then the number of people who were like, Stephen's book is heresy. It is heretical. It is foolishness. And I said, have you read it? And they said, I don't need to.
I don't need to. Okay.
But like, if I was going to give Kevin Deyoung, because he probably is going to listen, and Kevin is going to say like, what wisdom would you impart to me? And I would simply say this, you haven't dealt with the arguments.
No, go back to the beginning and don't just with respect to Stephen's book, just pick out the thing that to his people is the most absurd. Like he talked about seed wells and fat pastors.
Fat pastors. Because he knows all the like hysterical women are going to be like, tone and posture is all wrong. I knew it.
I knew it. He called my pastor fat. First of all, I have been a fat pastor before. And I don't want to be one. So Stephen, I'm giving you permission right now. This is for Stephen, and then I'm going to talk to Kevin. If I cross 25% body fat again in my life, Stephen, you have permission to relentlessly mock me. You can write a whole book called Against Fat Pastors, parentheses, I'm talking to you, Brian. And I'll read it and I'll take it to heart. But
That's what friends do.
Yeah, that's what friends do. But to Kevin, I would say, yeah, go back. You haven't started yet. You haven't even started addressing Christian nationalism because you're doing it on a pre-rational level, assuming a liberal frame, assuming that which needs to be demonstrated. It's called begging the question. When you assume in the premises the conclusion, whether overtly or implicitly, you're assuming in the premises your own conclusions. It invalidates your argument. Speaking of arguments, validity and soundness. So what you need to do is go back to do the reading and actually address the arguments. Like, address the real things that Stephen said. Address the real weighty interactions that the Christian nationalists have had with all of the people on your side. Because almost everything here, virtually everything here, has already been answered about, 10,372 times. This is nothing new. This does nothing. It doesn't move the needle. All it does is make people who are already captured by the institutions that you have a vested interest in saying, wow, that was helpful. It's not persuasive to any of us.
No. Indeed. Well, Brian,
I feel like that was a fair, even-handed, and frankly polite interaction.
I'm just thinking of the teats on the whatever gods.
Okay. I need you to stop. See, if we had a Christian prince, you wouldn't have to think about it.
I wouldn't have to think about it.
Because I wouldn't even have known to make that reference. But
I know.
Like I do. Let's make a nation where our magistrates can tell the difference. Where Vivek Ramaswamy Rushduni Manami is not, Rushduni was accidental drive-by there. Where Vivek isn't like praising God in public and you're like, which God, Vivek? Which one?
That's right.
Which one?
Which God? The Christian God.
Yeah, it better be.
So we'll have a discussion in the after hours
about something.
If you think this was fun, just you wait and see.
Yeah, and you guys, if you appreciate what we do here, believe it or not, we are not getting any support from institutions.
Other than Qatar, but...
Well, I was trying to keep that. Other than Qatar.
You see the water glass here?
Well...
This is big money.
Qatar's not paying for this one. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, if you want to help support what we do here at New Christendom Press, patreon.com is a great place. Link in the description. And that's where you can check out our after hours show that we do most of the time when we do a main episode. And also grab some books. Go to newchristendompress.com. We've got Edgington's new book, White Knights and Reviling Wives.
Kevin should read it.
The Boniface Option by Andrew Isker is a great book on some of the stuff we've just talked about. We have books in the works with our own Stephen Wolfe. He's working on a book for us. We've got a bunch of good stuff in the works. So check it out. And any last words? Why don't you just get us fired up?
I want to let people know that you can believe in a Christian nation, that you can simply follow Scripture, you can love your God, and you can build a place for your people that is Christian. And you can believe that with all your heart and soul, and then you can go get to work, and Kevin Deyoung can't stop you. So as you go to do that, Festin Alente, make haste slowly.
Dude, let's flip and go.
Let's go.
Let's go!